First and foremost, guys, I just want to mention that we are giving away a TACTACAM November 15th. That is the cutoff. Like, comment, subscribe. That's all you got to do. You're entered in that giveaway. Number 2, it is booking season. It is the time of the year in which we start booking up a lot of clients all over the country. Last year I was everywhere from Kansas to New Hampshire and pretty much everywhere in between. So if that is something that you guys have interest in, having us come out to your property, writing a comprehensive report so that you can pull deer off your neighbor's property, know where to put your trail cameras, tree stands, make money on your property, all these different things. Write a timber stand improvement report plan, how to plant food plots, when to plant, what to plant, all the goodies. Make sure you go to our Facebook and shoot us a message, or email me at whitetaillandmanagement@gmail.com. Let's get into the video. How to call bucks, guys. There are 3 strategies that I like to use when calling in bucks, but what I will say before we even mention those strategies is they are all scenario based, and that's what I want to talk about today. So before we get into that, I will mention the 3 different strategies that I really kind of lean heavily on. And you're not probably, these aren't groundbreaking. This isn't something you've never heard of before, but you need to know when to use them. So you got your grunting, you have your rattling, and you have your snort wheezing. And there's a time in which you need to use each one. They're scenario based. What it comes down to, guys, is the buck that you're hunting, you really need to assess the situation. Is he a 1-year-old buck? Is he a 2-year-old buck? Is he a 7-year-old buck? And more importantly than maybe even that, what are his mannerisms? Hopefully you have a little bit of history with this deer if you're the private land guy, but if you don't on the public land, that's fine. You just need to assess the situation at that given time and figure out, does this deer seem like he's just kind of tiptoeing around? He's been shot at 8 times already, or is he coming in there and he's raking the brush like it's nobody's business, and he's pawing up the ground? Because each one of those scenarios is going to call for a different tactic when calling this buck. When to grunt. When to grunt, guys. This is the bottom. This is the bottom of the pyramid. This is a safe one to almost always start with, because most times you're not going to scare a deer away from a grunt with a grunt. I say that, but I also can think of places that I've hunted in the past, like the Wisconsins, where everybody owns a 40 and a 20 and everybody's doing it. And maybe that's a time in which you don't call. Okay, maybe that's how you call these bucks. You don't. You're the silent one. You're there with next to no presence, and you catch them with the element of surprise. But so we'll put that underneath grunting, but the next bottom of the pyramid one is grunting. Grunting's probably the safest one you can do. And if that buck just comes out into the field and he's not showing any aggression, maybe it's a little bit early in the pre-rut, maybe he's just got done breeding a doe and he's pretty worn out. If we throw him a soft little grunt, or maybe a little tending grunt, that's a good way to figure out what he's interested in. If we just came out right off the rip and he walked out into the open field and we started banging the antlers together, there's a good chance we might just startle him, catch him off guard, and he might head off into God knows where and head off and get out of that property, or run away at least, and not give you a shot opportunity. So starting with the grunting is always a good way to kind of gauge, all right, what's this buck thinking? And sometimes that's good enough right there, and that'll bring that deer in. The one thing I would recommend when grunting, snort wheezing, and or rattling, though, is making sure he can't see you. Making sure he's behind a tree, because next thing you know, he's got to reposition himself in your direction to look, and he doesn't realize it. But he's also he's at that point partially committed to you. He's already turned his body in your direction. So the percentage of that deer coming in just raised dramatically, all because you waited till he was behind something to turn and come in. So give him the soft grunt. Okay, that didn't work. Another calling strategy that I like to use is rattling. Okay, and now to me, rattling means a couple things. One, rattling is clicking the antlers together a little bit, and I like to use smaller antlers. I tickle these small antlers together to replicate smaller bucks, so that maybe a bigger buck that is inferior when it comes to like his temperament or something like that would still come in and I wouldn't scare him. But another thing I like to do with my antlers is start scraping or rattling into the brush, like making noises, making it sound like I'm making a rub. This is not a loud noise that's going to startle a deer or scare a deer. It's going to snap his head around and he's going to look over in that direction, but he's not going to freak out and probably run out of the county because he's heard bucks raking the brush many times before. So that is the next one on the pyramid of calling in bucks. But once again, in order for you to move around up in your tree stand, make sure that buck can't see you. Make sure he's back in the thicket, he's behind a tree, over the ridge, whatever. The next one that I'm probably going to do is the snort wheeze. Now this is still pretty common. Deer do hear this quite often, and that's enough to maybe get him to snap his head around. And if he is a dominant deer in the area, or just an angry deer, or a deer with a temperament, that's probably going to work and pull him in. And what that snort wheeze is saying to him is, it's a challenge. It's like, hey, you're in my area, these are my does that I'm watching over, and you can't have them. And he might be caught off guard thinking that he's the dominant buck in the area, and he might need to come investigate that. So that's what time in which I would use the snort wheeze. Notice that we're talking about these incrementally or in the pyramid. There's a reason why we need to start with one and maybe not jump to the next one, unless you know the deer well and you know he's just an aggressive son of a gun, and you think snort wheezing and or rattling, our next option, is going to bring him in. Now there's 2 times I'll rattle, guys, and I'm going to be honest with you, I like to blind rattle, especially when I'm in places like Iowa or Missouri, or places with high buck density. Chances are you don't always pull in the mature bucks, but you are going to pull in bucks, and it's going to make for a fun hunt. But the other time in which I'm going to probably rattle is when these bucks go up and over the ridge, or out of sight completely, or they're 200, 300, 400 yards away, and I'm trying to get them to close the distance. At least get them to turn my direction, and maybe he's not running for me, but he's meandering, and there's a good chance that within 10 to 15 minutes he's going to make it over to me. So rattling is something you need to be careful with. And if you're a guy who lives in Michigan, pressured areas in Wisconsin, Minnesota, some of these states, I almost would recommend you don't bring the rattling antlers, because I hate to say it, your neighbors are probably doing it and overdoing it and over-educating these deer. And that's why I put this at the top of the pyramid. It's a high-risk, high-reward scenario. I think if you're in the Missouris, the Iowas, the Illinois, the Kentuckys, places where people don't own 20 acres contiguously, like 20 and 20 and 20 with 10 different property owners, I think there's a better chance that you can get away with these higher-end calling strategies. So at the end of the day, guys, this is how I'm calling to bucks, and this is the order in which I'm calling into bucks. I'm calling these bucks in unless I know these bucks, I know their temperament, or I have history with these bucks, guys. So at the end of the day, don't be afraid to call, but just know when and how to call.